This story still chills me to the bone. It's not something I like to remember, but sometimes, late at night, it creeps into my mind. It happens in my village a few years ago. A quiet place where everyone knows everyone's business. We lived simple lives, but some secrets were darker than we could imagine. Amina and Kofi were siblings. Amina was the quiet, obedient type, always helping their mother. She was beautiful, tall, with smooth skin and bright eyes that sparkled when she smiled. Kofi was her older brother, strong and well-liked in the village. People would joke that he could marry any girl he wanted. They seemed like a normal family. But as I got to know them better, I realized something was off. I was friends with Kofi. We used to spend time together, fetching water or playing football with the other boys. I visited their house often, and that's when I noticed things. Amina's eyes followed Kofi everywhere, and she always seemed to find a way to be near him. She wasn't just a caring sister. It was different, too intense. One day, I came over to meet Kofi. He wasn't home yet, so I sat with Amina outside while she was weaving a mat. It was a normal conversation until she suddenly asked, "Do you think Kofi will ever leave me?" I laughed, thinking she meant he moved away like many boys did to find work. I said he might, but he will always be your brother. Her voice dropped, and she said something I will never forget. "I don't want him to leave. I can't imagine life without him." Something about the way she said it sent a chill through me. It didn't sound like a sister missing her brother. I changed the topic quickly, but I couldn't shake the feelings that something was wrong. A few weeks later, the pieces started to come together. I was walking back from the stream at sunset when I passed by their house. Their parent wasn't home. I heard voices coming from behind the house. "Amina and Kofi." "We can't, Amina," Kofi was saying. He sounded panicked, almost angry. "But I love you," she said, her voice breaking. My heart started to pounding. I froze, not knowing whether to leave or listen. "No one will understand," Kofi said. His voice was quieter now. "I don't care," Amina cried. "I don't care about anyone else." I couldn't hear the rest because my head was spinning. I ran home as fast as I could, my heart racing. I told myself, maybe I misunderstood, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. After that night, I noticed how people started to talk. Someone saw Amina and Kofi walking together late at night, holding hands. Another said Amina had been seen sneaking into Kofi's room. The whispers grew louder until they reached the elders. The elders in our village don't take these things lightly. They called their parents to a meeting. Everyone knew something was wrong because Amina and Kofi's father looked furious when he returned home that night. The next day, Kofi packed his things and left. They said he went to the city to stay with an uncle. But everyone knew the truth. Amina stopped talking to anyone. She looked empty, like the life had been drained out of her. She didn't come to the market or visit friends. The worst part is, No one talk about it openly. People only whisper, shaking their heads in disapproval. What a shame, they say. How could siblings let this happen? I sometimes wonder what Kofi and Amina were thinking. How they let their feelings get to that point. It's not something you can undo. It's a stain that does not wash away. Even now, when I pass by their old house, I feel uneasy. Amina still lives there. But she's not the same. She looked lost, as if a part of her left with Kofi. The village never really forgave them, and I don't think they ever forgive themselves. This story is a warning for me, as a reminder of how fragile and dangerous emotions can be when they cross boundaries that should never be crossed. I don't think I will ever forget what I heard that night. It's a secret I wish I never knew. Life in the village carried on. But for Amina and her family, everything had changed. Their once lively home became quiet, almost ghost-like. People avoided them, whispering behind their backs. The shame hung over them like a dark cloud. Amina rarely left the house. On the rare occasion, she did. Her head was always down, avoiding the judgmental stares of the villagers. I see her walking to the stream early in the morning when no one else was around. She moved like a shadow, as if she didn't belong in the world anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had so many questions. Did their parents know the full truth? Was Kofi forced to leave? Or did he choose to go? Did he regret it? One day, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to visit Amina. It felt wrong, but I needed answers. When I arrived, she was sitting on the steps of their house, staring into the distance. She looked thinner, like she hadn't been eating. Amina, I said softly, sitting next to her. She didn't look at me, but she didn't tell me to leave either. After a long silence, I asked, "Do you ever hear from Kofi?" She flinched at his name. Her hands tightened around the edge of her dress. "No," she whispered. "He's gone. He's not coming back." Her voice was broke. Something in me, it wasn't anger or sadness. It was emptiness. "You miss him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She finally turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand," she said. "He was my everything, more than a brother, more than family." I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she continued. "It wasn't something we planned. I just love him. And he loved me. But no one would understand. Not you. Not our parents. Not the village. To everyone, it's just wrong." I wanted to tell her that it was wrong, but the way she looked at me stopped me. It wasn't asking for understanding, something I wasn't sure I could give. "Do you think I am a monster?" she asked suddenly. I shook my head, but I didn't have the courage to speak. After that, I left. I couldn't stay there any longer. Her words stayed with me, twisting and turning in my mind. I felt guilty for ever listening, for being a part of something I didn't want to know. Weeks turned into months, and life in the village slowly returned to normal for everyone except Amina and her family. Her parents carried on as best they could, but their faces always looked heavier, like they were carrying an invisible weight. People still whispered, but with time, even the gossip started to fade. Amina, however, seemed to disappear entirely. She rarely came outside anymore. And when she did, she looked hollow. Her bright eyes, the ones that used to sparkle when she smiled, were dull and lifeless. She became a ghost of herself, haunting the edges of the village. One day, something happened that no one could ignore. It was during this dry season, and everyone was gathered at the village well, waiting to fill their buckets. Amina suddenly appeared, walking straight through the crowd. She wasn't carrying a bucket, and she didn't greet anyone. She looked weird. Her hair was unkempt, and her dress hung loose on her free body. The villagers froze, watching her as she walked to the edge of the well. For a moment, she just stood there, staring down into the darkness. Someone shouted, "Amina, what are you doing?" But she didn't answer. She just stood there like she was in a trance. Her mother came running, screaming her name. "Amina, stop!" It was only when her mother grabbed her arm that Amina seemed to wake up. She collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I can't do it anymore," she cried. "I can't live like this. Everyone hates me. Everyone thinks I am disgusting. Even Kofi left me." Her mother held her tightly, rocking her back, and fought like a child. The villagers watched in silence, their judgment replaced by something else. Maybe pity, maybe fear. After that day, Amina's family decided to leave the village. They packed their things quietly, avoiding the stares of the villagers. No one tried to stop them. By the time the sun rose the next day, they were gone. Years have passed since then, but the story of Amina and Kofi still lingers. People tell it as a warning, a tale of shame and forbidden love. As for me, I can't forget her face, the way she looked at me that day when she asked if I thought she was a monster. Sometimes I wonder if I should have done more, said something to help her. But what could I have said? Some things are too broken to face. The last I heard, Kofi never came back, and no one knows where Amina or her family went. But in the quiet moment, when the village is still and the moonlight casts long shadows, I think about them. I think about how love, when misplaced, can control everything it touches. And I wonder if they ever found peace, or if their story will haunt them as it haunts me. Years later, I moved to the city for work, trying to leave behind the memories of that time. But life has a strange way of bringing the past back to you when you least expect it. One evening, as I walked through a busy market in the city, I saw a woman selling fruit by the roadside. She was thin, her shoulders hunched, her face was hidden beneath a scarf. Something about her felt familiar, though I couldn't place it at first. When I passed her, our eyes met. For a moment, I froze. It was Amina. Her once bright eyes were tired as sunken. Her face lined with years of struggle. She looked older than her age, as though life had drained her. She recognized me too, but she didn't smile. She looked down quietly, as if ashamed. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach her. After a moment, I gathered the courage and walked over. "Amina," I said softly. She didn't look up. "Don't say my name," she whispered. I stood here, unsure of what to do. Finally, she spoke again. Her voice was trembling. "Why are you here? Why now?" "I didn't know you were here," I said. I just wanted to know if you are okay." She laughed bitterly, a sound that made my chest tighten. "Okay, do I look okay to you?" I didn't know what to say. Her pain was still raw, even after all these years. "What happened after you left the village?" "What happened after you left the village?" I asked, my voice low. She sighed, leaning back against the wooden step. "We thought leaving would make things better, but it didn't. People always find out. Even in a new place, my parents tried to protect me, but the shame followed us everywhere. My father grew sick, and my mother..." Her voice cracked. She blamed me for everything. For Kofi leaving, for the whispers, for the life we lost. "And Kofi?" I asked hesitantly. At the mention of his name, her face hardened. "He never came back, not once. He's living his life somewhere, probably pretending I don't exist. Maybe he is happy. I hope he is." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. "But me," she continued, "I am stuck here, selling fruit to survive. Every day I wonder what might have happened if things had been different. If I had been different." We stood there in silence, the noise of the market fading into the background. Finally, she looked at me. "Do you hate me?" Her question caught me off guard. "No," I said honestly. "I don't hate you, Amina. I just don't understand." "Neither do I," she said quietly. Before I could say more, she turned away, busying herself with arranging the fruit. It was clear she didn't want to talk anymore. I left, feeling a heaviness in my chest that stayed with me long after. That was the last time I saw Amina. I have passed by the market since, but her stall is always empty. I don't know where she went or if she is even alive. Sometimes, late at night, I think about her and Kofi, about how a love that should have been pure became something forbidden, something that destroyed both of them. I wonder if they ever find peace, or if their story will always be a wound that never heals. All I know is that it's a story I will carry with me forever. A story that reminds me how thin the line is between love and destruction, and how some choices once made can never be undone. Months turned into years, and Amina's face became a memory, faded but persistent. I heard whispers now and then from people who claim to have seen her in other markets or in a faraway towns, but nothing concrete. Kofi, on the other hand, was never spoken of again. It was as though he had vanished completely, swallowed by the shame that drove him from the village. One day, as I sat with an elder in my village, The subject of Amina families came up unexpectedly. He had been quiet for a while, his pipe sending thin streams of smoke into the air, before he finally said, "Do you know why some stories leave us?" I didn't answer immediately, unsure of what he was leading to. "They stay because they are warnings," he continued. "Not just about what happened, but about what could happen to any of us." Amina's story isn't just hers, it's ours. A reflection of how we fail to protect those who need understanding. His words struck me, and I understand the question that has always haunted me. Do you think it was their fault? Amina and Kofi. The other looked at me for a long time before speaking. Fault is a heavy word. What they did was wrong by the laws of the land and of the spirit. But love, when it blinds you, does not listen to laws. And we, as their people, should have guided them before it was too late. Instead, we cast stones. I didn't know what to say for years. I had carried guilt of witnessing their story unfold and doing nothing to stop it. But his words made me realize that I wasn't alone in that guilt. The entire village bore it, even if they refused to acknowledge it. A few weeks later, I heard a rumor that caught me by surprise. Amina had been seen in another village nearby, not as a beggar or as a fruit seller, but as a healer. People said she has found a way to use her pain to help others. Some claim she could cure ailments that even modern doctors couldn't. Curious and unable to resist, I decided to visit the village. When I arrived, I found her easily. She was sitting under a large bamboo tree, surrounded by people seeking for help. She looked older, yes, but stronger too. There was a calmness in her that hadn't been there before. When the crowd thinned, I approached her. For a moment, she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened, and she gave a small, tired smile. "It's been a long time," she said. "It has," I replied, unsure of how to begin. We talked for a while, mostly about small things. I didn't bring up Kofi or the past, but she eventually did. "You are wondering if I have forgiven him," she said, reading my thoughts. I nodded. She sighed deeply. "I don't know if I have. I don't know if I will ever. But I have learned something important. Carrying anger only poisons you. So I have tried to let it go. To let him go." Her words stayed with me long after I left. To this day, Amina's story is one I think often. It's a reminder of how fragile we are, how easily love can become something dark and destructive. But it's also a story of resilience, of how even the deepest wound can begin to heal, if only we allow them to. I still wonder about Kofi, where he is, if he's found peace, if he is even alive. But as for Amina, I believe she has found her place in the world, far from the shadows of her village, a place where she can begin to rewrite her story, not as a victim of a forbidden love, but as a survivor of it. I hope you learn from this story. Don't just listen, but learn something. Be careful with your choices. Be careful where your feelings led you. It is very destructive if you make the wrong one. If you love this story, I would like you to subscribe and share this video. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you in my next video, and bye.